So I know that I'm a bit late talking about this, and everyone else has shared their thoughts on this, and that is on the passing of Kevin Conroy, who's known for being the voice of Batman, and who is my favorite actor to play the character. I When I found out the news, it was in the morning. I woken up from having a nice sleep. I got my phone out, saw the news, and I immediately felt like I wanted to process it, but at the same time, I didn't want to quickly make a video about it and come across as you're just talking about it because it's recent and you don't care about it, and I didn't want it to come across to myself of like you're just gonna quickly rush to the laptop to make a video about this thing. I did not want to come across as that, so I wanted to take some time to process and how I was going to handle it and talk about it. And I think for me, I mean, naturally, the question, I think for a lot of people in the online sphere, with Kevin Conroy, it's not, because it's going to be Batman. The answer will be Batman. But it's like, where was your first exposure of him playing Batman in for a lot of people, it might be the Arkham games, right? Or Injustice, or maybe a certain anime film, or maybe is Batman the animated series, or another series in the DCAU. Maybe they watched Superman, and then they had the World Finest crossover. It's like, oh yeah, and then all that. And I think my first exposure to him as the character, I think it has. I think it had to be. It was It was the anime series, the latest stuff. It was one of the video games, Batman Vengeance. I didn't finish it. I remember renting it from the video store. I didn't finish it. I couldn't figure out at the time to work out. It's quite early on how to fight Joker when he's swinging on him pulling a Miley Cyrus on the wrecking ball. But that was I think my first exposure to Kevin Conroy playing Batman. And naturally, I start watching the anime series, and then I start watching, because I'm born in '96, so naturally I didn't watch it when it was airing, but I start watching the anime series and loving it, and start watching I start watching Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, very sporadic around, like maybe catching like the first 5 minutes, and then the ads come in, and then you kind of switch to a different thing just so had something to watch, just so you didn't have to watch ads and all that kind of stuff, and then you miss bits and pieces. So very somatic with Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And then of course you got the Arkham games, you got Injustice, and what happened was, I think what made me realize like he's probably is my favorite actor to play the character was probably when I start reading comics. And this is back in 2008. Dark Knight came out. Oddly enough, The Dark Knight was the film that got me into comics. Of me reading the source material. And I start, going on the top 10 lists and going through which ones go to the library, anything that had the word Batman in it, kind of grab it. And I realized when I was reading a Batman comic, I think it was always like Batman or Spider-Man for the Marvel side of things, but when I was reading Batman, I had his voice in my head, that's when I realized that okay, he is probably is my favorite version of the character. When that stuff's happening, or when I was like, hey, I'm enjoying writing. Naturally, I'll start writing some write my own fan fiction on Batman and create my own Batman stories, in screenwriting form, and I realized the the Batman that I have in my head, the voice that comes out isn't any of the live action actors. As much as I enjoy Patterson and Keaton, and I love what Ben Affleck has done with the character and all that kind of stuff, I had Conroy in my head, and the spacing of this, the spacing of how the character would speak and how Batman would speak and all that. And it's just like that's when you realize, okay, like he is probably the definitive version. He's the one that defined the character. He's the one who thought of he's the first one who thought like dual identity. Bruce Wayne shouldn't, like, he's a bit of a playboy. Let him be different than Batman. They're two separate characters. Treat them as two separate characters. And he got to play Batman in live action in the final Arrowverse crossover, which was Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he got to play the character in live action. And for us fans, it was like this kind of full circle thing. And so that was a neat treat, a treat to see him, actually perform. It wasn't just his voice; he was performing as the character. Even when Killing Joke, like, it was cool. It was cool to see, as bad as that movie was, to hear him as Batman saying Alan Moore's lines on the big screen. That was neat. That was cool. Even as much as I went at home, got my copy of the Killing Joke comic, and was like walking on the cradle as saying, "What did they do to you?" But he was awesome, and of course, as much as Mark Hamill was, and Taylor Swan was as Joker and Batgirl, it was a treat to hear his voice on the big screen. And I will end with this. If someone has never seen the animated series, has never heard of him playing Batman at all, they didn't even saw him in Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Arrowverse crossover, what would I recommend? Master of the Phantasm. I mean, Batman the animated series is not a bad way to go if you want to watch, if you want to watch a whole TV show. But if you want just a sample size and understand why, all I would say is Mask of the Phantasm, and you will be like, yep, I get it, absolutely get it.